Ladies and gentlemen, Denice Gary Pandel here, and it's just a pleasure to have Raymond Ibrahim, author, speaker. Raymond, thank you for coming on the Denice Gary Show. I know that you're a specialist when it comes to the Arabic language and Muslim persecution of Christians, and we're just thrilled that you can be with us today. Thank you.
Oh, thanks very much. Happy to be with you, Denice.
Thank you. So, ladies and gentlemen, we've talked about how recently Turkey is, using imperialism to begin to spread Islamic supremacy in the Middle East. We've talked on this broadcast about Turkey invading Syria in order to rout out the Kurds. Something new that you might not have heard on any other newscast. The fact that the economic zones in the Mediterranean that include the Greek islands of Rhodes and Crete are specific objectives now by Turkey. Turkey wants to take these Greek islands and make them a part of Turkey. They've been involved in oil and gas exploration in Cypriot waters. They invaded the island of Cyprus in 1974. They're still there. The island remains divided between the Greeks and the Turks. So the Turks continue to spread their Islamic dominance in the region. And Raymond, you wrote a really important piece called Reliving the Glory and Gory Days of Jihad. Put up his website. Ladies and gentlemen, you can check this article out at RaymondIbrahim.com. The title of this piece is Turkey Reliving the Gory Days of Jihad. And Raymond, can you, I was just, as I started to read the piece, your opening line, that historic churches that are inside Turkey really represent what you call today victory mosques. Victory mosques. Talk to the audience. What do you mean by victory mosques? And you mentioned that, and a lot of people I'm sure don't know this, that Turkey was once a Christian region. Talk to us about that.
Sure, Denice. Well, as you were mentioning, Turkey's hostilities with Cyprus and Greece and all of these other Greek islands, Greek-speaking areas, actually goes way, way before this. And most people forget that the actual country, Turkey, before it became Turkey and was called Turkey, was called Anatolia, and it was actually a very ancient Greek Christian region, all of Turkey. In fact, all the letters, a great chunk of the letters that St. Paul wrote were to ancient Christian communities in what we now call Turkey. Of course, it was called Anatolia, the land of the East. So that too was very Greek,
interesting,
very Christian.
Yes.
And it was conquered slowly, bit by bit, chunk by chunk, by invading Turks from the east, beginning in the 11th century. And essentially, it's a long history, but it culminates, around 1453, and the Turks conquer Constantinople, and then even after that, up until 1683, they go as far as the gates of Vienna. Right. So basically, Turkey, in its entire essence, is a jihadist state, and it was like that in its origins, especially the Ottoman Turks, who were, of all the dynasties throughout Islamic history, the most committed to the ideals of jihad, and their entire existence was based on spreading out through violence and conquest, so that even today, the very country, Turkey itself, was 100% of a Christian nation, Greek-speaking, and now it's what we all nonchalantly refer to as an Islamic Turkey. So that's why when you look at it, it has ancient Christian churches still within it. A lot of them, of course, have been turned into mosques or victory mosques, by which I mean throughout history, Muslims have had a penchant for whenever they conquer a non-Muslim temple of worship, be it a church, a synagogue.
Yes, I was going to say Buddhist, a synagogue.
Yeah, or a Buddhist or Hindu temple.
Oh, okay.
Oftentimes, either they're completely destroyed or the nicer ones, for example, such as the Hagia Sophia, are kept
Hagia Sophia, okay.
and turned into mosques.
Okay.
And this happened all throughout history, everywhere, east, west, north, south. And the reason it's meant to be a victory mosque because it basically, it's a manifestation of the Islamic war cry, Allah Akbar, which means Allah is greater. And so here we see how Allah is greater. He's taking the former God's temple, and it's become his temple. So this definitely has a long history, paper trail, both in Turkey and all around. But that's why you still have some small ones that were kept and turned into museums. And even these very few ones are now being turned again into mosques.
Okay.
And which means all the ancient frescoes of Christ and the artwork is going to be now
destroyed.
Okay. So it can be purified into a mosque. So basically, history is repeating itself, and Turkey, as I said, historically was the jihadist state, the greatest of all, and it's trying to reclaim that, and we can see that in many ways.
So ancient historic Byzantine art by the Greeks has been destroyed and is in the process of being further destroyed.
Right.
Oh, that's incredible. And isn't there anything within, I didn't think to research this before the broadcast. Is there anything within international law to provide safeguards against the destruction of ancient artifacts? Is there nothing that can be done by the international community to protect these churches?
Well, I mean, probably from Turkey's rebuttal will be that we're not destroying it. We're turning it into something better.
A mosque, right.
And no one is there really to see exactly what they're doing. Oftentimes they'll just say there's no frescoes, but the particular church in question is known to have a lot of, preserved artwork. So the assumption is obviously they're going to do something to get rid of it. Otherwise it can't be a mosque, but they said it will be a mosque.
This reminds me of Bethlehem. I had the news on the other day as I was getting ready for my class in the morning, and they talked about Bethlehem. I think this was actually on Fox and Friends early in the morning. Again, I'm getting ready for work, and I heard, but I was listening, and I heard, I think it's a former military officer talking about how he went to Bethlehem. This was a majority Christian city. Well, probably at one point it was a majority Jewish city and became a majority Christian city. Now it's a majority Muslim city. And he was saying how when he would try to talk to some of the Christians, nobody would actually come on camera, talk about the persecution, churches being closed in Bethlehem as a result of, the fear of punitive measures of punishment coming from the Palestinian Authority or the Palestine Liberation Organization, those people in control over Bethlehem from the Muslim community. Are you familiar with that situation as well?
Well, I know that Christians who are, again, a very small minority in the Palestinian Authority region, they do experience a lot of pressure, oftentimes forced conversion and whatnot. And it's
forced
true,
conversion.
And it's true, it doesn't get out in the public. It's sort of hushed up because it's definitely doesn't help the Palestinian cause if you find out that they themselves are, suppressing their minority.
How do you force a conversion, Raymond? Can you explain that to the audience? How Turks, how Muslim Arab Palestinians forced conversions? I mean, what does that look like to somebody on the ground as a Christian?
I mean, it takes all different forms. It could
Such
be
as?
From the tip of the sword, renounce your religion and embrace Islam or die.
Right.
This is actually one of the most mainstream forms throughout history, but also going on to this very day.
ISIS used it as
in
used
various
it.
places.
Mm-hmm.
ISIS, Boko Haram, Al-Shabaab.
Al-Qaeda.
But more often than not, it becomes a form of, it becomes part of the society where you realize that if you're a Christian and you find out you are ostracized. And so from every angle, including, work and just being part of society, you find that if you become Islamic or you convert to Islam, that's much better for your social condition and it elevates it. So oftentimes that's the other way. A lot of people, for example, you have to pay a special tax historically. It's called jizya if you're a Jew or a Christian under Islamic authority,
right?
And you have to deal with all these debilitations and social limitations. So obviously, you can see the appeal for people throughout the centuries to just leave their religions and join the winning team of Islam, so they can at least get a fair share, as it were, that life among in society.
Sure. So
that's why it ranges from just quiet pressures of that sort in the society to literally at the tip of the sword.
So if I'm a Christian and I'm living in Turkey, or I'm on the ground in Bethlehem, let's say I have a business, or like for example a restaurant. Am I going to notice that Muslims might not frequent the restaurant because they find out I'm a Christian, and so yes, I'll literally have to move because my business will not succeed as a Christian? Is that the kind of social economic pressure you're talking about?
That's definitely one kind. But more often than not, you probably wouldn't even have the means to open a business to start with.
Okay.
All right. Because
you're not able to prosper, actually,
right,
rise above and prosper. Got it. Okay.
Exactly.
The kind of I'm thinking, this is the same kind of persecution that the Jews have experienced. They experienced it, of course, in Christian Europe, and the Jews experienced it in Muslim lands as well, just not in every case, not in every place, but in many cases. There's a lot of documentation to support the fact that they couldn't get a good education, and they couldn't rise above or rise out of poverty in order to flourish, because they were, kept down as second and third class, inferior, infidel type individuals. Tell me, Raymond, I want to understand, why is it that Turkey, a NATO ally of the United States of America and European Union countries, why is it that we don't hear anything from the United States, or maybe there are things being said by the president to the president of Turkey, Erdogan, but why isn't there something being talked about in terms of the fact that there is a small but Christian minority population in Turkey? Don't some churches need to be left open so that people can attend church on Sunday? I know that President Trump, more than any other previous president, is working on trying to create freedoms for Christians. I know he brought home from Turkey a Christian pastor. I'm sure you remember that. I believe his name is Andrew. Is it Andrew Branson? Yes. And I think he's trying to address this issue. Why doesn't Turkey just say, and why isn't there a sufficient pressure placed on Turkey to say, we need to keep some churches open, we need to respect religious freedom?
Well, officially, Turkey will say that's what they're doing. And there are a few churches open. And one of the things that's going on in Turkey also is, the Christian population is pretty minuscule, at least according to official numbers.
Right.
So they would argue that there are enough churches for whatever Christians there are.
Okay.
And there is no discrimination. And this is what all Islamic nations officially will say.
Okay.
And like you said, we don't really know what happens behind the scenes and what they say, the presidents and diplomats and so forth. But, Turkey officially, if you were talking to one of its leaders or, its media would be outraged at what I'm telling you. And they would say this is all lies and everything in Turkey's fine and its minorities are treated wonderfully and so forth. So
I've heard it's
one
not.
Of the problems. Yeah.
I've heard from Turkish Christians that it's not. Do you know, is there a Turkish Christian underground? Is there an underground church?
Because, there may well be.
Okay, you're just not...
I personally wouldn't know because it would be underground.
Okay.
But, that sort of thing is prevalent in a lot of places, especially in, nations like Somalia, where if they know you're even Christian, they'll kill you outright. But there frequently are these types of underground churches all throughout the Islamic world, and they meet in homes, and then they get arrested. You can ask the same question about Saudi Arabia. There's not a single church there, and Christians who meet at home for Christmas get arrested and hauled off in jail. Does
I don't know.
There's a disconnect.
Yeah, I don't know. I get the impression from statements, and I've done a little bit of research, not a lot, but a little bit. I do get the impression that this issue has been raised within the Muslim world. In fact, if my memory serves me correctly, the issue was actually surprisingly made public when the president talked about how there needed to be religious freedom, even in Saudi Arabia. And, you know, the Crown Prince, I think, responded ever so slightly to that. But anyway, I'm looking at this article again, ladies and gentlemen, Turkey reliving the gory days of jihad. Another one you wrote, Islam in the West, motives behind the false narrative. We're running out of time, and I know you have very limited time today. Real quick, Islam in the West, motives behind the false narrative. What's the false narrative, Raymond?
Well, the false narrative deals with history, because everything deals with history, but basically that somehow in the past, or basically the Islamic world is angry today because it has grievances of a historical nature against the West, and that historically it's the West that was the aggressor against Islam, and it's the one that persecuted Muslims and so forth.
Okay.
And if anything, and so the narrative goes, if anything, we, the West, need to be make up for it. Okay. We need to be nice to Muslims. We need to go an extra mile. We need to just overlook anything, et cetera, et cetera. The fact is the exact opposite. Okay, so historically, Islam was the one that was the aggressor.
Imperialist.
It swallowed up 3/4 of the Christian world in the historic jihad. It enslaved between something like 15 million people.
Okay.
Europeans. This has nothing to do with Africans and Asians. Right.
This is Europe, Christian Europe. Yeah. Real quick, I want to ask you a question before you have to go. So, personally, I'm in the classroom every day. I had just wanting to get your thought on how I should have reacted. I had a Muslim student, a young woman from Yemen, come up to me and say that she wanted to pray right then and there in the classroom. And because this is a public educational institution, I said, please step outside, take a break, pray, and then come back in, and I'll get you set on where the students are at that point in time. And she went to the administration, said that I was anti-Muslim because I didn't allow her to pray in the classroom, and then suggested, because I had made a statement about how Americans might acknowledge that Islamic terrorism will continue in the 21st century, I was heavily criticized for that. Are those kinds of statements, in your thinking on this, did I somehow mishandle that? Is it she said to me, that is not Islam to suggest that there's Islamic terrorism. Your thought on that real quick.
Well, I mean, this is the ancient argument, which I go through all the time. So I somehow associate terrorism, violence, and tolerism with Islam intrinsically. People like her, no doubt, would get angry and complain and
report you to your superiors.
And try to do whatever they can. For example, they had me disinvited from the War College because of this. It was Muslim groups, and they got offended, and they said I was lying and distorting. So no, it doesn't in any way, shape, or form shock me. But it just goes. It's kind of what I call it soft jihad.
It is a soft jihad. Yeah. And I wanted to ask you, my point when I was called on the carpet, in a mean-spirited way, by the way, I said Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, the leader of ISIS, the Islamic State that cut children in half and crucified people on crosses, he was an Islamic scholar. Is my understanding, based on my research, he had a doctorate degree on Islamic studies. So how could I be suggesting, how could anybody be suggesting that somebody like Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi is embracing a false religion when he's a scholar in Islam and many well-educated Islamists that support terrorism actually are very well informed about of the Quran and the Hadiths and know what they're talking about. Your thought real quick as we close.
Well, no, I mean, that's it. A man who is a murderer and sadistic massacre of people and crucifies and beheads and sells women and children on the slave market is also a expert on Islamic law. So, whereas that's not a shocker to me. That obviously makes much sense.
How does a Muslim get away with saying that's fake Islam and you're Islamophobic?
Well, because they appeal to the sort of postmodern soft mentality amongst some Western, liberal, leftist secularists who are just convinced that Islam must mean peace, and you say otherwise, you're a bad person.
Right.
They never take the time to look at the actual sources of Islam and see, who's right, who's wrong.
All right. Raymond Ibrahim, I know you told me ahead of time you've got to run. Thank you so much for helping people understand the issues better. We really appreciate it. And you just have a great evening. Thank you, sir.
You too, Denise. Thanks for having me. Take care.
You're welcome. Thank you. Bye-bye. Ladies and gentlemen, today is Tuesday Giving. And I would so appreciate it if you would consider, perhaps prayerfully consider, if you're someone that likes to pray and prays regularly, contributing to the Middle East Initiative. This is my educational foundation. It's a 501c3, so it's a tax-deductible contribution. Again, you can write a check or a money order if you like to remain anonymous. You can send something to the Middle East Initiative, my 501c3. I'll be sure and send you a thank you note with the tax ID number available for your accountant or for you when you do your taxes this next year. Anyway, please consider a generous gift to the Middle East Initiative. Doesn't matter how small or how large, it's appreciated because we're an independent radio or podcast group, and we need your support. We need your help to pay the bills. So send it to the Middle East Initiative, Post Office Box 82162, P.O. Box 82162, Bakersfield, California. Bakersfield, California, 93380. It's so appreciated. I want to talk about Frugatti's Restaurant, a fabulous Italian restaurant right here in our area in California. We're in the county of Kern in the city of Bakersfield. Come and have a fabulous Italian dinner at Frugatti's there on Coffee Road between Truxton Avenue and Stockdale Highway. You'll so enjoy. The food's fabulous. Tell Ralph Frugaletti you heard all about his restaurant on the Denise Gary Show. And let's take it away on Anata's products.
President Trump has correctly stated that economic security is national security. And in the Tehachapi Mountains of Kern County resides a United States defense contractor, Anata's Products. Here is the Silicon Valley of the aerospace industry, right here in East Kern. Anata's Products is a forward-leaning manufacturer and distributor of hardware sold to major defense and aerospace companies. We're talking about Boeing, Lockheed Martin, United Technologies, Northrop Grumman, Raytheon General Electric, and on the list goes, as well as to every United States ally worldwide, including Israel, America's most important strategic ally in the Middle East. And for everything that flies, Anata's Products is providing the parts. And with me today is the president of Anata's Products, Scott Baker. Hi, Scott.
How you doing?
Scott, tell us why you believe this corner of Kern County is the hub of the aerospace industry.
Well, this portion of Southern California here out in the Antelope Valley, it contains, some of the most cutting-edge technology going on in aviation today. We have some of the UCAS programs with unmanned technologies going on. We have Edwards Air Force Base out here who's doing continual testing in their area. We have the Naval Weapons Station up there at China Lake doing some fantastic cutting edge stuff, cruise missile technology, and those things are going on. We have Scale Composites locally doing a lot of composite technology, which is new. We have SpaceX, which is a private one entity putting things into space now. This area is the growth center for aviation's future. And this is the area I think that as a nation we need to be concentrating some of our effort and taking this technology. And as we all know, with the space program from Apollo years ago, out of these technologies, we the private sector are going to reap some of the benefits of that.
Thank you, Scott. Ladies and gentlemen, Scott Baker, president of Anatays Products. Anatays Products, located in the beautiful mountains of Tehachapi, California, in eastern Kern County, is home to some of the most innovative and specialized technologies in the world, including those at the U.S. Naval Air Warfare Center, Weapons Division at China Lake, Edwards Air Force Base, as well as Strata Launch, launching satellites capable of delivering multiple orbits in a single flight to space. And it is Anatays Products that has provided the manufactured devices. And the president, Scott Baker of Anatays Products, Marine Corps veteran, reactivated on 9/11 to monitor threats to the homeland, is carrying on a tradition of providing for the security of the United States by manufacturing every kind of fastener on anything that flies, as well as providing a full testing destructive laboratory. Contact Anatays Products, now in business for 30 years, at 661-822-6873. Located at 1314 Goodrich Drive in Tehachapi for your manufacturing and testing needs today.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for listening to the Denice Gary Show. You have a wonderful evening. We'll be right back with you tomorrow with Philip Haney, former Department of Homeland Security and Intel Specialist on all things relating to terrorist networks.